Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of run-down no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
My Bigfoot sightings happened in Florida and northern New Hampshire. My earliest encounter that I can remember, I was pretty young. I was probably about 6 or 7 years old. Now, I was a little kid that loved being in the outdoors. I didn't want anyone following me. I just loved to wander. And I always had like an attraction to animals. It was kind of strange. You know, my mother didn't like it too much. You know, I'd take a walk around the woods behind our house and come back with about 6 feral dogs following me. And my mom would come home from work, find those dogs all over her lawn and pitch a fit. But for some reason, animals have always been attracted to me. So, you know, I remember one time when I was a Girl Scout, right before my first encounter, my dad was out with me doing a Girl Scout camp out with the families. And I got up early one morning. I was supposed to have a buddy with me to go to the restroom. I didn't want to wake anyone. And we just had a drought. There was a bunch of dried fish around down in the Everglades down there. And I just wanted to wander around a little bit with no one being awake, no one watching me. And I just wanted to smash on some of those dried fish. And we had these plants called cattails down there. And I would pull them apart and blow them around, pretending it was snow. Remember, I'm a kid who grew up in South Florida. But I got bit by a snake. I saw a big black snake slithering away. It scared me. I saw the blood. I took off running back to camp, which was a big mistake. One of the fathers saw me, got me down to the ground, and I had been bit by a water moccasin. I ended up being rushed to the hospital, spent probably about 2 weeks, I think. I was young, so it was hard to remember exactly how long. But not long after that, several months, my church was doing a camp out for us kids from all over the state. So we were invited up to Ocala National Forest. And of course, even after being bit by the snake, didn't stop me from my wandering. I just loved being out there. Nothing scared me. No animals, nothing. At the camp out, though, we were in cabins. None of the kids from my church were girls that had gone. I really didn't want to go. My mom wanted me to have that experience, so I went anyway. But I didn't end up making any friends. It was several days into it. I called my mom. I wanted to go home. We had a magic show that was coming up in a couple days. So the counselors had talked me into staying. And I thought, all right, I'll stay. And then I want to go home the next day. I stayed until the magic show. And we had gone to lunch that day. We had a late lunch. And they had started the magic show right after that. By this time, I had made actually a couple of friends, which I was happy about. And right at the beginning of the magic show, a counselor come to get me. It was starting to get dark, but my mom was on the phone. She wanted to talk to me to make sure she was still coming to pick me up the next day. I had to run from the mess hall all the way back to the camp office, which I was young, so I don't remember how long it was, but I know it was kind of in an L-shaped pattern, the trail that we had to stay on, and it was pretty far away from the cabins in the main office. But I ran back to the office, and I told her that I'm fine. I'll be fine. You know, I made some friends. I want to stay. I just want to get back to the magic show. I was super excited. And she said that was all right. So I figured, all right, I'm going to run back to my cabin real quick because it's pretty close to the office. And I'm going to grab a bunch of Red Hots because I just made a couple of friends. So I want to bring the Red Hots back. I ran back to the cabin, rooted around for them, found them, shoved them in my pocket. Went to step outside. It's now getting pretty dark. We had a couple of lights that were out there lighting up the cabin area, but it was pouring down rain, pouring. So I thought, well, okay, I want to save a little time. I'm an adventurous kid. So I decided to cut through the woods. I figure, it's in an L-shaped pattern. So if I head in this one direction, I'm going to be able to find my way back to the mess hall because there's lights out in front of that too. Not a problem. If I stay under the trees, I'll stay somewhat dry, somewhat. This is Florida, so it was pretty thick. There was a lot of palmettos and very tall trees. I thought I could run it. But once you enter the woods beyond the cabin, there's no running. There is no way. So I tried to make my way through the brush. And then I figured out that palmetto bushes have spikes and stuff on them. They will cut you up. So going back was very, very slow going. It's pouring down rain. It's getting really dark. I still had confidence that I could get back there without having to turn around and find the trail again. So I just kept going. There was a little stream and it was filling up pretty quickly from the rain. And I tried to jump over this little stream, but I'm small and I was wearing just flip-flops on. I didn't have any sneakers or socks on. And my foot had gotten stuck in the mud. I slipped. My foot got stuck in the mud. My shoe ended up coming off. I ended up cutting it on something. I don't know what was under the water, but I pulled it out and I kept going. I couldn't get my shoe back. By this time, I'm completely lost. I don't remember any stream anywhere near our cabins, anywhere near the mess hall. It's pouring down rain, so I didn't know what to do. I wanted to turn around, but I figured, if I just keep going in this general direction, I'll find my way back. I'm not sure exactly how much time went by, but by this time I'm getting really worried. I sat down a couple of times under these pine trees and big palmetto bushes around me, trying to stay dry and think of what I'm going to do. I ended up hearing voices yelling in the distance somewhere. So I tried to follow the voices and it just, I couldn't do it. I didn't know what, the rain started getting harder, started thundering, started lightning. I'm getting really scared. At that age, I was just so young that I remember sitting under a tree. I thought maybe if I climb the tree, maybe that people can hear me. But by this time, the pain in my foot and the blood had gotten so much because I ended up cutting my foot from just below, between the big toe and the next toe, all the way down to the heel of my foot. And it was pretty deep. I didn't know what to do. There was no way I could climb the tree. So I just I sat there and just cried, hoping that I could hear the voices again. But with the wind and the lightning and the thunder, it just drowned it out. I didn't hear anything but the rain pounding. I remember being roughly picked up from behind. Something from behind had picked me up. I was so exhausted that I thought someone found me. I'm finally rescued. I can get out of here. But I was just so drowsy at the time. But something felt different, really different. And there was a smell, a really bad smell, because whatever had picked me up had held me close. And I remember pushing back. And then I figured out this is a female of some sort, and she's hairy. There was a lot of hair. And there was a smell on her chest that actually made me feel like I was going to vomit. And I'm thinking, this is an animal. This is an animal. First thing I thought of was an orangutan. I'm a little kid, South Florida. I grew up. There's a lot of fly-by-night circuses that I've been to. Orangutan was the only thing I could think of. The hair that was on, whatever had picked me up it was thick, it was wet, and it just stunk like rotten milk. I remember smelling rotten milk and like a dirty, wet dog and poo. I remember thinking that. And then I thought, well, if I vomit, this thing is going to get mad at me. And I didn't know what to do, but I was I wanted to be put down. I kept pushing. Whatever had held me grabbed me, pulled me closer. Now I'm thinking it's a monkey, a big monkey. It pulled me closer. And so my head was resting on the breast. And I remember being so embarrassed. I'm a little kid. I'm embarrassed touching this animal's breast, but I don't know what had happened. I started to cry. Some of this I'm getting from my mother. She had told me as I got older that I had told her that whatever was carrying me, when I would start to cry, it would make like these cooing sounds, almost like it was trying to comfort me. I don't personally remember that part, but she told me that that's what I told her after I had been found and everything. But this creature had just walked and walked and walked. And I was beginning to think that I was never going to get home. I had no clue where we were. And I think I passed out a few times because a lot of time had gone by that I can't remember. But I remember being put down pretty roughly. I was set down. And then I looked up and I figured out that I'm right outside of the mess hall where I was supposed to end up to begin with. And the creature was gone, completely gone. I didn't see what it was. I didn't see anything outside of just being carried and being held close. I remember hearing voices, seeing flashlights coming up the trail. I started to cry then again. I remember that very, very well. They were coming up the trail towards the mess hall. There was a lot of people in uniforms. Some of them I recognized as park rangers that we had talked to before. My counselors were there. They picked me up again. And the first person who picked me up, I'm guessing, was an EMS person or fire and rescue or, whatever it was back then. But I remember thinking she is so small compared by what had just carried me for probably hours. Very, very tiny. So whatever had carried me was quite large. But the only time I remember being really scared that night was when they had put me in the truck that they were taking me to the hospital in. They had called my parents and they told me that the parents were going to meet me at the hospital and that I was probably going to need stitches. So after getting lost, being carried by some animal, nothing scared me until I heard the word stitches. But yeah, my parents had us at the hospital. My memory kind of breaks up from there because I think I was in and out. But later, when I grew up, my mother had gone back and talked about that. And she said she had gotten a call from the counselors. They said that I had gone to the phone. They couldn't find me. I never showed back up. They contacted law enforcement. They contacted the rangers or park rangers that were out there. And they did a search. They could not find me. My parents took off from South Florida up to Ocala as fast as they could, to figure out what was going on. But when I was picked up right outside of the mess hall, they found footprints, big footprints. They were trying to figure out how I got back there because I would have had to have gone past somebody to get back there, but nobody saw anything. No one saw me. No one saw any animal carrying me. They didn't see anything. I just kept telling them that it was an orangutan. It was an orangutan that carried me because it had long, orangish brown hair that I kept being pushed up to and kept pushing away. So my mom said that, my clothes that were collected, which was one of my favorite shirts, it was Wonder Woman. This is the early 70s. So it was Wonder Woman. My shirt was confiscated. I never got that back. My mom said I was covered in orange brown hair and no one could figure out how I got that on me or what the footprints belonged to. They just never mentioned it again. So the only thing that my young mind could wrap it up to was an orangutan. But if it was an orangutan, it had to have been very, very large. Just comparing how I was being carried to when I'm going to guess it was an EMS lady had picked me up. And there was such a size difference. I can't really describe it because I was so young, but I just remember thinking that the person who picked me up was very, very small. Almost like I thought it was a teenager or another kid compared to what had carried me. So, that was kind of a mystery growing up there. But, as years moved on and everything, I was a teenager. By this time, we had moved into Central Florida. We were probably about an hour north of Okeechobee in an area that was still developing and growing. I remember being quite angry that my parents took me away from South Florida. I missed my swamps. I missed my grandparents. We moved into a neighborhood that only had a couple of houses. It was our house. that had just been built. There was a neighbor's house that was being built, and there was a neighbor on the other side of us, which, I was friends with them. They worked for the sheriff's department. The wife was a nurse. The husband worked for the sheriff's department. My mother also worked for the sheriff's department. And I had made a friend in high school. I won't give her name, but I shared things of when I was younger with her. And one of the things that I had shared with her was, ever since I was really little, I've been able to hear things and see things that most people don't. I found out that my grandmother was a medium. My mother also saw things, but she never talked about it. But this was the only friend that I would talk to, because I really didn't talk to many people at all. I didn't want them knowing this. I mentioned a few things about seeing things when I was younger, and the repercussions from that, from people. I didn't want to deal with it, so I didn't tell anyone. Well, this was one friend that I did share things with, and she asked if I could spend the night at her house. She's from a very country family. They did a lot of fishing and hiking, which I missed from being in South Florida. So, I went over and we talked about things. Well, she was pretty upset. She had lost a cousin in a car accident, and where her house was situated, it was a dirt road, and it was kind of U-shaped, and the whole area right there was probably about 5 or 6 houses in that same U, and it was all family, all of her family. They had been there for years and years and years. But if you walk behind her house, which they had, I'm going to say, a decent sized regular backyard, and then it cut straight into the woods. There was a trail going off into the woods. And I'd been at her house a few times. I knew it was down the trail. It was a family cemetery, a little bit of distance away from the houses. But she wanted to see if I could pick anything up from her cousin. So I didn't really want to, but we decided to walk the trail at night after her parents went to sleep and just see if I could feel anything about her cousin. So we started walking down that back trail. I got very uncomfortable. I could tell, that feeling that you get when you enter the woods and everything is completely silent. There's nothing. There's not even a breeze going through. There's no crickets. And, we're way out there. So there's no crickets. There's nothing. I just wanted to turn around and go back. But she talked me into it. So we kept going. We got to the cemetery. It had these old cemetery gates. It wasn't very big. It was pretty small. We sat down. She lit a candle. It went out. She lit it again. It went out. So there was a breeze. You just couldn't hear it. You couldn't hear it through the trees. Nothing. Total silence. I told her I just didn't feel anything. I was uncomfortable. I wanted to go. There's something out here. I don't want to be here. We started just kind of looking around. We're young teens. We were probably about 14, 15 years old, maybe. So we're just looking around, decide to pick up, grab our things, and just go back to the house. She was a little bit upset with me that, I couldn't pick up anything on her cousin, but I saw eyes. It was her who stopped me. She's like, look. And we looked around. There was eyes at different height levels. I'm going to say probably about maybe 6, 7 sets of eyes, just almost with a glow. Some of them we could tell was close to our height. Some of them we could tell were quite tall. I don't know if it was something in the trees or what it was. But then I just got this really strong feeling, we need to leave. We need to leave right now and get back. So we started to run towards the gates. We had just opened up the gates, entered the woods, and then I don't remember anything. Everything just, both of us had passed out. I don't know how. I don't know why. I don't know what happened. We woke up right outside of the wood line by her back door. And neither one of us had any clue as to what had happened. We just remember the eyes. I'm not sure exactly what that was, but giving past experience, the only thing I could think of was what I call a forest creature. I don't know for sure. There was a stack of acorns that was near us on the ground that wasn't there before. They looked like they had been purposely stacked there. This scared my friend half to death. She ran back inside when we had woke up, and she refused to go back out. I ended up losing a friendship over this because she had called me all sorts of names. I don't know if she thought maybe I had done something, but that stopped me from sharing anything with anyone. So I kept my mouth shut. And most of the time, from now on, I stayed out of the woods. Time went by. I grew up, got married, had children, moved up to New Hampshire. Now I was way up in New Hampshire. I was right outside of Cherry Mountain. So yeah, it's in the northern part of New Hampshire, and it's extremely rural out there, extremely. Now, I'd been in the woods in a long time, so I loved being in the woods. So I thought, well, my husband hunts, so he got a couple of guns, got our passes, our permits. We started scouting out the areas. We were there probably about 3 years, went out each year, and he still had yet to get his deer. But I was really enjoying the mountains of New Hampshire, extremely. I just absolutely loved it. I just wanted to be away from Florida and the cities and everything and get back into nature, forgetting my past experiences about why I didn't want to go back into the woods to begin with. It was late afternoon one year, I think it was around 2015. And we had maybe one more hour of daylight left of hunting time. And we stopped. We had found this old logging trail. You could tell it was rarely used at all. It was way up on the mountain. Took us quite a while to get up there. We had parked our vehicle as close as we could get, got out of the car, and started walking a little bit higher. We were above the timberline at this point. And here we go again with absolute silence. That feeling where you just want to run. I told my husband, I said, something is wrong. We need to go back to the car. We need to go back. We only had one more hour. He's going on his third year of no deer. So he's like, no, everything's fine. It's fine. And then we heard a growl. It was off to our right side. Now, this being northern New Hampshire, this is December, the first week of December, last day of hunting season. And I'm looking for a bear. I'm looking around, but the trees were so stripped of any leaves or anything. So you could see around you. There was a few patches of pine trees and stuff where it would get dark, and it was damp out. Being that time of the afternoon, we had snow before that. Snow usually starts around late October up there, and we had patches of ice on the ground. There was mud right there where we heard the first growl. There was a tree that had been on the edge of the trail that had fallen over, and its roots were exposed. So the mud was pretty soft in that area. But I remember grabbing the roots and looking around because I didn't want to slip in the mud. I had slipped my foot just a little bit and, pulled it out, saw my footprint and everything. And I'm looking around and I can't see anything. So we go a little bit further and another growl hits both of us. And this growl was like, it was almost like it was right there next to us, but it wasn't, because I could see what was right near us. Where the trail was, there was a little bit, I'm going to say probably a 1 to 2 foot embankment that went up, which goes right out into the forest. And I was looking to my right side. I glanced a little bit where it was in a dark area because the trunks of the trees look almost black when they're damp up there. So it was a little bit darker area. I'm looking for this bear. I'm ready to hightail it right back to the car. My husband continues around the tree. He did hear the growl, but he told me to ignore it. He has a gun. I'm carrying a camera around my neck, and I've got a 9mm on my side, which I didn't even think about taking out of the holster. But I'm looking around, and he rounds this bend. My husband, it's a very small trail, but he rounds the bend just far enough where I could hear him walking, cracking the ice where it was icy. But I'm still looking off to the right because I just had a really, really bad feeling. And that's when I noticed there was movement. It looked like a tree, probably about 30 feet away, maybe 40 feet. It looked like a tree was swaying just a little bit in that dark area of pine trees. But then I look up at the treetops. There's no wind. There's nothing. It's just one single tree moving. And then wrapped around a tree right next to where I saw the movement was like an arm, almost as if you'd think of a very large bear that's climbing up a tree, but its backside is, the bear would be facing you, but you'd have the tree trunk right there in front, but you'd see the arms of it or the front legs wrapped around it. It was kind of like that, but it was really high and really large. And then I realized that that's not a bear. This is something moving. It's a creature standing upright. The first thing I thought about was we're being peeked on by a man in a ghillie suit. So this is really creepy. But I saw the eyes. The eyes just kind of locked the eyes with me, and it had stuck a head out, and the head, you could tell immediately this was not a man. This is not a man. This is way too big. It had golden eyes, but it had curled back its lips, and there was teeth where it would give a growl through the teeth, and the growl was so low that you could feel it. You could feel it in your chest, down to your feet. I couldn't move. I was scared, really, really scared. But your mind is going crazy. It's like thinking, is this a bear? Is this a man? Is it a gorilla? What is this? You're just not even thinking. And then I heard my husband give like a cough or something where he was trying to get my attention. And then the creature that was looking at me turned. It had black fur. It blended in perfectly with the trees that was next to us. The only thing that I could tell that there was something standing there was the movement and the eyes and the upturned lip. That the hand that was wrapped around was the right hand. It was wrapped around a tree next to it, and the hand was actually positioned above it. And I saw the hand move almost like it was going to come out completely from behind the tree. I didn't know if I was going to be rushed or what, but I couldn't move. I don't know what had locked me into place. I'm guessing it's that fear, flight or fight mode. I don't know, but I could not move until I heard my husband call for me or cough for me or whatever he had did to get my attention. The creature turned its eyes away from mine and looked towards his direction. That's when I could move. That's when I felt like I was unfrozen at this point, and I could actually move. I ran towards him. I told him, we have to leave. We have to leave. We have to leave. He finally gave in and put his gun back in the bag that he had and put the safety back on, the whole works. And he's like, all right, we'll go. As we were walking back, we walked back past that area where the tree had come down and the roots were exposed, where I had stopped for a minute. And I saw my footprint. I did not want to step further in the mud, so I would slip. So I stepped back into my own print. Right in front of my own print, there was another print that was not there before. It was huge. I bent down to look at it. I called my husband over to it, and I said, what is this? It's huge. And honestly, the first thing that went through my head, I didn't think about that creature that I had locked eyes with earlier. I thought, what is a big man doing out in these woods way up above the timberline in December with no shoes on? You could see toe prints, but it was humongous. Really, really big. I wish I had thought about it because I was carrying a camera. A lot of people say, why don't you take a picture of that? Why didn't you get a picture of this? Well, you're not thinking about that. You completely forget. You don't know what you're carrying. You just wanted to get out of there. So I didn't even think to take a picture of the print that I had seen. But it kind of, we made it back to the car without being growled at, and we left. And not only was my husband a hunter, but so was his father. So the first chance I got, I drew the foot that I had seen, and I asked him, because he's been hunting those woods for years and years and years. And I said, what is this? I can't find anything that this would belong to. It's too wide. It's too big to be a human. Is there an animal out here that has a print like this? And of course, there isn't. He said he's seen him many times. I wish I could have talked to him more before I moved back down to Tennessee, but he said, you saw a Sasquatch. That's what it was. That's what this print is. He said he's seen him lots of times. Many, many times he's been out and had his own encounters. He said he has seen prints that big. He's seen them mostly in black color. But he said, when you're out, just, if it gets quiet like that, walk away, go to a different area, don't stay there. He thinks that we walked into probably a male hunting, being that time of the day and everything, and the fact that we were growled at. I don't know, but I did not want to enter the woods at all anymore. At first, I didn't tell my husband that I had locked eyes with it. He saw the print and he said, we need to leave. I didn't know if he had any experiences himself. I didn't want to say anything because I was afraid he would think I was crazy or something. I just didn't want to say anything. So each season comes around. He wants to get his buck. So we go back out and I pretend like, yeah, I'm into it. Let's go. But then when we would get out there, I would pretend to be sick, or all of a sudden, and I can't go out. I was too scared, way too scared to enter the woods again. I can't even describe the feeling that I felt at the time. I don't even know what to say, because it was just so scary that I just didn't want to do it. I didn't tell him this. I would secretly bring my knitting stuff and hide it in my backpack so I could give him an excuse that I'm sick. But this happened several times over the next several years before I finally broke down and told him what had happened. And he said that I didn't need to be afraid to not tell him because he's had his own experiences. So this made me feel a little bit better. Probably about another year went by, and maybe not even that long. It was the following spring. We decided to go not as far up in the timberline on Cherry Mountain as we were before, but, a lot lower. We were below the treetop, and the area that we went into had just opened. They keep that area shut off so that cars can't drive up there because they don't plow it. It's an old dirt road, so they don't plow it, but it goes from the southern part of Cherry Mountain up to the northern part where it breaks out into a neighborhood. So it goes up the mountain, back down the mountain. But in that area, there's I'm going to say a decent sized pond. I wouldn't really call it a lake, but so every now and then people will pull over and either camp along there or go fishing. It had a lot of fish. It was stocked. So we took, just my husband and my son-in-law, and we went up there and they were fishing. And at this time I was in grad school and I was doing some reports. And so I just kind of sat in the van close to where they were fishing at. They started hearing movement behind them. They come running back to the van, and I told them there's no reason to be afraid. I said, were you growled at? We just kind of made a joke of it. But then they started hearing some crashing, something big. And I said, well, maybe it's a moose. But they never ended up seeing what it was, but they grabbed their stuff and ran, threw everything into the back of the car. And like 2 weeks later, we decided to go camping not too far from there. There's nobody out there yet because it's still quite cold in late spring, hitting early summer. I mean, I've seen it snow up there in May, but there's a camping spot too far to walk to where they were fishing at before, but probably about a 5-10 minute drive going up Cherry Mountain. So we stopped at this camping spot. Perfect. Nobody's out there. It's a nice, big sandy area this time, a little bit of gravel and rock. We're right next to, behind where we put our tent. It turns into a lot harder because it's starting to go up a pretty steep hill, and then it flattens out, and then there's like a game trail right there. You can take the game trail and go down and walk for a little while, and there's the pond. So, we set up our camp and, get the campfire going and everything, and cooked out that night and went to go to bed. And that's when my husband had woke me up. He heard something. He said it was making this sound. He didn't know what it was. He woke me up, and from behind us, up where the hill starts to go up, and you could tell it was fairly close, but not directly behind our tent. But it was like a whoop, whoop, whoop. And there was something in front of our tent going towards where the dirt road is, where we came in on. We're in the tree area, past the sandy area where we were camped, whooping back. And he's like, what do you think that is? I'm like, I don't know. And he got his gun out. We're laying there. We heard some coyotes that were a little bit closer. I don't think he completely cleaned up our campfire from cooking. That's something I usually do, but I was too tired that night. And so, being out there in the woods, we've got bear, we've got moose, we've got coyotes and stuff. So we thought the coyotes were coming in close. You could actually hear, the pads of their feet and the noises that they make. But the whooping continued from behind us and then in front of us. And you could almost hear it off to the side. So it was almost like 3 different things making these sounds, but it kept the coyotes at bay. The coyotes never came into our camp. He had told me earlier that when I was sleeping, before he heard the first whoop, that he could tell there was coyotes out there. I don't know how, but he told me he knew that they were out there. He had been in those woods a lot more years than I. He's from the area, so he had been there a lot longer than I had. But it woke him up, and that's when he heard the whooping, and that scared him more than the coyotes. But I got a feeling that the whooping was keeping the coyotes at bay. So in the morning, I got up fairly early. Sunlight was just breaking, and I wanted to go up that little ridge that was behind us and see what I could see, if there's any prints, if I could see the coyote prints or what was back there. I found another footprint, which I did take a picture of this time with my phone. I even put my shoe next to it. There was a huge footprint, and where the ground was getting harder, where it was more packed down, going up into more of the mountain, this print was pushed down. I couldn't even make a dent. If I walked by the area, you could barely tell that I was even there, outside of maybe a little bit of my shoe lining or something. But this went down a little bit, and it was quite big. Put my foot next to it. My husband measured it out. He said it looks to be at least 18 inches. But I just put my foot next to it as a reference. But then I looked next to it, and it looked like something had squatted there. I'm just going to call it big butt prints. They were pretty big, and you could tell that something had squatted there. And right next to those prints, there was it looks like almost something had curled up a hand and then pushed up off of the ground with their hand, because there was like knuckles. I even put my hand down next to it, and those were quite big. So I have a feeling that a few more of them were up there. And it seems to me that ever since I was little, that I know these creatures are out there. I heard stories from teachers when I was younger about swamp creatures. My mother is actually from Louisiana, and I'd heard about all different kinds of swamp things out there. And I just think that you're almost marked, because I can almost guarantee that if I'm going to go out somewhere, I'm going to have some type of an encounter. And here I am living in Tennessee next to the Smoky Mountains, and I want to go, but I don't want to go because I'm afraid, actually, just because of the growling, the facial expressions that I saw from the fact of being picked up when I was a kid. I just think that people who have seen it once, they're out there. People don't know that they're out there, but you're being watched a lot more than you think. And I don't know if it's just certain people where they actually show themselves to, but you just feel like you're marked. We did end up, before we moved down to Tennessee, we took our almost grown children and my then 3-year-old granddaughter. She was right before her 4th birthday, out to camp nowhere near the Cherry Mountain area. This time we were a little bit north near Cole something. I actually forgot the name of the town, but it's right before you lose power and stuff going from New Hampshire into Canada. There's a town that's up there that you stop having power lines or anything. So beyond that point to the border of Canada, there's nothing but wilderness. Well, we went out there just past Coleman, I think it is. Colebrook. I think it was Colebrook. And we went up just past there, and we found a little spot not too far off from the last little town that we were in. I didn't want to go too far, but we wanted to take the kids out. We were going to spend several weeks and take them out and just get them away from technology, basically. They always have their cell phones. These kids grew up not knowing a lot about being out in the woods. And so we want to make it a fun family time with no electronics, no nothing. We get out there. This time we're in a camper, no tent. I insisted on a camper. And we had set up one night, and my granddaughter, we had gotten her this huge ball, those great big bouncy balls that you get from like Walmart or some store like that. Great big ones. It was too big. I didn't want to bring it in the camper. So we kind of pushed it under the camper steps. And so that way it's wedged in. It's not going to blow away. It's not going to roll away. She'll have it the next morning. Well, my husband is laying at the end of the camper. We had the blinds and everything up where the bed actually goes right up to the window area. But he was facing inward with his back to the open wilderness behind him with just the breeze coming in. And my granddaughter is sitting there at the front of the bed facing him and facing where she could see out into the wilderness. And I'm sitting at the table and I'm just kind of listening to their conversation. And she's just giggling. And my husband is like, what's going on? Is something funny? Is Papa doing something funny? And she said, no. She said, the forest people, they're making faces at me. And he's just like, oh, okay. So we think, she has an imagination. So I'm just thinking that. And then she said, they really like my ball. And we're like, okay, well, let them play with your ball. And we just continue on. The next morning, we get up. Her ball's gone. No one's up. I get up first to start the coffee outside. The ball is gone, just completely gone. It was about probably 3 days later. The ball is back, wedged up under the steps, just like it was. And I had asked her, maybe if she had gotten up, or she said no. She said the little forest people, they like it. The little one likes it. So I got her to describe the forest people, and she said, well, they're very, very tall. They're bigger than Papa. They're big. They have a lot of hair, and they look like a funny man with a fat nose. That's exactly what she told me. She said, but they're very nice, and they just like to play. They just want to know what we were doing, and I just thought they were funny. But that continued for a little while, and we had finally left, but it kind of freaked my husband out. And in my mind, I'm thinking it's got to be exactly what I call the monkey men or whatever that live out there. So that's kind of the end of what, I had experienced through the years. I'm down here in Tennessee now. I will make it back out into the woods at some point, but I'm not quite ready because people just don't understand. You see this thing in front of you, and it's close enough where you can tell what it is, but your mind just doesn't want to believe it because that's just how society is. This can't be real. Almost like a Neanderthal type of, it's a person, but it's not a person. And then people they just want to think you're crazy. So for the most part, I keep everything to myself, and I just want to stay out of the woods for the most part. But yep, that pretty much wraps it up.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.